Yay.
Yay.
Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Nation. This is a podcast that I created to have honest conversations about the things we all go through but don't often share. Hello, I am joined today by this beautiful goddess up there, Naliyah.
Hi.
um, and so, each season, which is I'm only on the second one, but the first season I got to have a really interesting conversation with my father, actually around religion and spirituality and all of those things. And so when I started writing out second season, I was like, I think I want to make sure each season I hit that kind of like realm of topic a little bit. And when I did, I was like, I know who I want. It's you.
Honored.
But how we always start is with gratitude. So, what are you grateful for?
Mm. I feel really grateful for the soil and like the earth. I work in a garden and I've just learned so much about myself and like the earth and how we're all really just reflections of nature. So I just feel really, really thankful for like the symbolism of the soil, but also like the soil itself for birthing life and just sustaining ecosystems and like us and yeah, just being grounded and providing so much richness to life.
That's dope. That's dope. I was gonna say, is it a very grounding experience? And then you said it, so I'm like, there it is.
Yeah.
That's
What are you
dope.
grateful for?
Um, so this week particularly, I am grateful for new experiences. This past weekend, I had a really good weekend. Like I tried some new things. I met some new people. I told you I went to the past life regression workshop, and that was
Mm,
like a new experience. That was really, really dope. And yeah, it was just a lot of like new things that I tried this weekend that felt very healing. And slightly exhausting because of just how my energy and I interact and my body. And so it was really great. So I was really grateful for like some new experiences, meeting a bunch of new people, and hopping out of my comfort zone a little bit. And I always find that typically when I hop out of my comfort zone, I'm usually rewarded with something that is
mm.
valuable or useful. So I was really happy about that. So I was like, yay. Yay.
I'm happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So each week, I want to take the time to highlight a BIPOC, so BIPOC business highlight. Both of our highlights this week are Black-owned businesses. So the first one is The Box Care. And this was started by Chasmine Moses, the homie for Show Me. We are, I don't just the Bay, y'all, just a bunch of whole talented individuals, like so dope. So what she has is a subscription service box that is actually helping young women with understanding and like knowing what's going on with their bodies when it comes to like menstruation. And so, gentlemen, when you're listening right now, don't shut your ears off. Don't be weird and immature. Women have periods, and if they didn't, you wouldn't be here. But nonetheless, actually, sorry, that was a joke, but I'm not gonna take it. But nonetheless, and also the context of how she started the company was that her sister passed unexpectedly, and her sister had children, and so one of her nieces, when it came time for her to start her cycle, there was just like questions that she had, and it was really in support of her sister's, her niece's dad, and like helping to better explain like what's going on. So it's a subscription box that comes every month, and what comes in it, which is really, really dope, is like pads, wings, and feminine wipes and things of that nature. But it's also filled with a bunch of other really dope, cute stuff. So like this like hair pin that I'm going to be using this weekend when I do my hair. These cute socks, a little like mirror, like a compact mirror, a face mask, and a little like container that you can use to be discreet, because we know as young women that, especially like when we're at school and out and stuff, we don't want to just be like taking tampons and pads out. So a little bag in there, and each month it comes with a different set of things. So she switches it up. What I care the most about, sorry, I phrased that poorly. I care about all of it, but what I'm most excited about is actually the book that it comes with each month. And each month it's like a different edition. And it's so dope in here because she also has like a huge highlight on like mindfulness and also natural ways in which you could like deal with things like crimping and things of that nature. So yeah, it's like all these different like mindfulness practices and different things she's trying to teach. And I know that she has like recipes for like new things you can try with your daughter or niece or whoever you're getting it for. There's like a young girl highlight each month, and like there's just so much dope stuff. This like 4 phases, things that's explaining like what's going on in your cycle and like what phases you are and how to track it and like things of that nature, and just making sure that like young women are very informed about what's going on with their bodies, but also like incorporating the mindfulness aspect of it and like natural remedies and recipes that can be utilized as well. So it's really, really dope. I love it. She's an educator as well. So I know that she just recently got a grant that connected her with like utilizing her services with Oakland Unified. So super dope. If you want to find her, let me pull her up. You can go to theboxcare.com, and this is her website. And then also, so you could get it for your family, so whether you have a daughter or a niece or something of that nature. And then also you could donate and give as a gift. So you can give it to somebody else. So you can pay for the subscription and like send it to somebody else. So yeah, it's really, really dope. And you could also find her on Instagram at BoxCare as well. And then the last thing I wanted to shout out is there's another dope pod by another beautiful Black woman, Charmane's World Podcast, one of the beautiful women out of the Bay that also has a podcast. She is doing a podcast meetup and a live show on October 9th. And so if you are in the world of podcasting because you are just starting, you've been in it for a minute, you're thinking about starting any of those things, you should definitely go out to her event if you're out in Oakland. It's from 1 to 4 on September 9th. And it's going to be an opportunity to also just ask a lot of questions, get advice, feedback, to also be able to like people of the podcasting world to sit there and all collaborate. And then they also will be having vendors. And so if you also are a vendor that would like to market your services, then yeah, you can go there as well. So I would check her out by going to Charmane's World Pod, as you see up here, CHRMANE SWRLD pod, and find her on Instagram. And then you can also get tickets for that. I think they're like $10 if I remember correctly. But don't quote me on that because could be wrong. So yes, those are our BIPOC businesses that I wanted to highlight this week. And let's get started. Hey. So as I said before, yeah, like I wanted to make sure I have a episode that is dedicated to a lot of the things that I love and want to talk about regarding like spirituality. So I wanted to start by asking you kind of like what your spiritual journey has been like, and then also just like kind of like what are some of the spiritual practices that you have now that you like love to utilize?
I thought I was on mute. Yes, really good question. I feel like my spiritual journey, I feel like I was always really spiritual, even as a kid. I remember when I was younger, we used to live in this house and we had a front yard and it had like this really big like willow tree. And it always felt like so magical to me. And I remember my grandma, who's an Aquarius, would always come over and talk to me about like like women's intuition and just this like inner knowing. And I always have really like kind of lucid memories, if that makes sense. Like it didn't really feel real memories of living, you know, in that place with that really big willow tree and just like being a kid and it feeling like this other dimension and going into the tree and just feeling so like immersed in like and separate from this, you know, matrix as people call it. And part of that could have been being a kid and being really like, you know, um, immersed with my senses and not so like taken away from myself by like capitalism and the matrix and everything. But definitely like in the moment, it always felt really magical, and it felt like I couldn't put words to it when I was younger, but now I feel like it was definitely drawing a deeper connection with like you know, my ancestors and just like, you know, the spiritual realm, another dimension essentially. And I would say when so that was that phase of my life, just feeling very like in my own world almost. And I remember always like when I was younger, I don't know how this pertains to like, you know, my spiritual journey, but always having like deja vu of like moments that happened and not remembering if it was like something that actually happened or something that I dreamed. And so I remember just being younger and having these really weird, like, I don't know, like almost being in and out of like trances of like, did this happen? When did this happen? And like time being very warped for me as a kid. And I still experienced that a little bit, but not as much. And it almost felt like being in a dream. It's hard to put words to it.
No,
but
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it felt very like lucid, and like life felt very like malleable, if that makes sense. Like it didn't feel so
Which
like
it is,
rigid.
which is
Yeah.
dope.
And so, and then I guess I can jump to like middle school and like high school is when I felt like I dove into more like mainstream spirituality, to where it was kind of like, you know, like love and light and, you know, get these crystals and get these incense and do yoga and like, you know, the commercialization of spirituality essentially. And I think that in that phase it was very it felt very like heady, like, you know, as long as I meditate and as long as I like am positive and I'm always, you know, like nice to people, then I'm like good, like I'm a spiritual person, you know, like yes. And that was really destructive. I feel like I learned throughout high school and throughout middle school how that affected me, but it was almost in a way that like this, you know, commercialization of like spirituality and what it was supposed to be was so deeply ingrained in me that I thought that, you know, this feeling of like non-positivity or like feeling uncomfortable or grief or anger or things like that in regards to situations or people was wrong and it was bad because it was you know, I wasn't transmuting and I wasn't, I mean, I didn't know that word in high school, but that's what in my mind it was. Like I wasn't taking the negative and making it positive. So I feel like, you know, in high school I was into stretching. I won't call it yoga. I was into stretching. I think one of my old high school teachers gave me like a yoga mat and they're like, oh, I heard you, I remember you telling me you're into this. So like, here's the yoga mat. And I was like, oh my God, yes, I'm spiritual now. It's actually really cringy when I think about it, but you know, we all have our process.
Right. Look, Mom, I made it.
Yeah. You know, and you know, it was I will say it was really good for like building a routine because I definitely had a really strong routine where I would like wake up and do yoga. And then when I got home, I would do yoga and I would like stretch, and drink tea and, you know, things like that. It was a really good routine for my physical body. But when it comes to like, you know, spiritually and like etherically, I was feeling a lot of turmoil within myself because I was denying the fluidity of my human experience, essentially, because I was so deeply in this space where I was like, you know, in very like up here, like in the air, like floating. I wasn't really like in my body, experiencing my emotions and like experiencing this body that I'm in. So yeah, I just remember also being in a space a little bit. There was a moment I was also very like aware, like self-aware to acknowledge when I was judging people, but I feel like it I want to take accountability and say that I allowed, this conception of mainstream spirituality to think of myself as like higher than people, which was really being really honest with myself. Like that is a moment that I experienced, and I was like, this doesn't feel spiritual. At a moment, I had to sit down with myself. I was like, if I'm really sitting here and letting myself think that I'm better than someone because I sit down and I stretch and I drink tea and I have access to these things also.
Come on now.
That I'm like, I'm better than whatever. So I nipped that in the bud real quick. I was like, okay, that feels like ego. That feels like something that's counterproductive to being in touch with myself and being really grounded in learning about myself, which is the space I'm in now. So moving forward from that really like heady, like life is a matrix and like all of this very like, I was almost in a daze at a certain point. I was like, there's so much information that I was taking in about how to be spiritual that I wasn't actually existing, which is, consciously existing is being spiritual. Like you're choosing to exist in your body, and your spirit and your body are intact and are aligned. So moving forward, throughout college, I was still in that phase of like, crystals are going to save me and save you from the world. And, all of these external things are going to save us, and we're going to be good. We're going to be meditating, on a hill, and everything's going to be fine. So that was college, like moving through college, the beginning phases, freshman, sophomore year, I was like, yes, these are going to save us. Everyone needs to have crystals and meditate. We're good. And, part of me was also like, there's more to this, but I wasn't allowing myself to get to that yet. Cause there was also, the real life factors of like being in college and working and not really having a lot of time to like sit with myself. So I was like, this is going to have to suffice. And I was kind of like, telling myself that this is what spirituality was, because that's what I made time for. Moving forward, I definitely sunk deeper into myself. And I had a moment where I was like, I don't know if you're into numerology or anything, but we talked about this. So in numerology, of course, everyone has a life path number, but also we have a number associated with the year, which represents what cycle and what energy will bring for that year. So when the pandemic started, which was last year, 2020, God, time is so crazy. I was in a cycle of 7. And so 7 represents spirituality. Well, not obviously, I don't want to assume, but 7 represents spirituality, intuition, like philosophy, and also like just going within yourself and very like internally, like figuring out what life means to you, kind of like this internal quest of like, what is the meaning of life type shit.
Yep, that's my life path number, so I get it.
So if you have life path 7, like that's your life. And so,
I know.
Yeah, this podcast makes sense. So it's like, what? Let's sit down and make some sense out of this shit. But basically, that was my experience 2020 when the pandemic happened. And I had a moment where I was like, none of this shit matters. Like in regards to like all of the like external things that are representative of spirituality. I was like, yeah, none of this shit even really matters. Like I have a body, I have a spirit, I'm existing, and I'm spiritual on my own. Like, I don't need all of these things to tell me that I'm supposed to be this way, or to tell me that I'm spiritual, because it's all materialism, and it's all I think it reminds me of this IGTV I was watching from this person's Instagram. I can't remember their name, but when I remember, I will say it. And they were talking about how like we really externalize all of our we externalize our power, and we externalize everything to be outside of ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves to recognize that we have everything we need within us. And they were also saying how like all of these mechanisms of spirituality, like herbs and crystals, mostly herbs, but like herbs, crystals, teas, and yoni steams, and all of the plant medicine, exactly, were essentially like tools of survival for our ancestors, because we didn't have access to ourselves, essentially. Because if you think about like enslavement, like what does that do to you? Like, psychologically, spiritually, you don't really have any like physical protection with your body. So plant medicine was really created, and all of the religions around it were really created as a means of survival and protection, in times of enslavement and bondage. And she was saying how like we're not necessarily enslaved right now. People who aren't, of course, considering aren't incarcerated, are who aren't literally physically enslaved. But speaking from her experience, like, I'm not enslaved, so I don't need to attach so much of myself into these external things. Granted, also, religion is powerful, and religion is not, and this, I'm not saying this by any means to like knock anyone, like you shouldn't practice plant medicine. I practice it. So I'm saying this, I guess, because it made me think about like, what is my relationship to plant medicine, and am I doing this as a means of supporting me in my process of reconnecting with myself, or am I doing this as a means of like, I don't know, just like being perceived as spiritual, or like,
or in the place of, like,
exactly.
I think all of these things, as you said, are tools that help you realign with yourself. And if you're using them as almost as like a placebo,
right,
to just make you feel good for the time being, versus like allowing it to be a tool that leads you back to you in some way, I think it's obviously useful. But it is like, I mean, a lot of what you're saying, I definitely just had a conversation recently with somebody of just like how glamorized spirituality has been. And I feel like it's had an even larger uptake in the last couple of years, because it's people, I think, trying to make sense of a lot of chaos and a lot of things that they may not understand. And it's also sometimes it's needing to feel like it's a sense of control, right? So like, if I don't feel like I'm in control of everything around me, but I can say this mantra and always be positive and do this thing, then I'm going to feel more in control, rather than relaxing into this idea of like, I got me. I got me, my body, my alignment with spirit, and the rest of this, I'm not even in control over. Like, this false sense of control is kind of will like disorient you, or also like kind of like sometimes lead you in a direction that makes you very dependent on things that are outside of yourself, because it'll give you this false sense that you are in control of everything, when I'm like, we just out here experiencing this thing,
right? And even
stuff,
so, we're out here just literally just experiencing life. And I understand, like, it's really hard to just sit through life and not like resist the urge to want to control and have a sense of like security. Cause like, you know, especially if you're existing in a space where you feel really out of control, you are like in a space where you probably want to reach for something to provide you security.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like part of what I took, part of coming from that is like, instead of reaching for those things that provide you security, part of, you know, spirituality, or I don't even want to put it like that, but like instead, like, why am I feeling unsafe? Why am I feeling not secure? Why am I feeling out of control? Where is this coming from? And like investigating that. So I feel like going from there, that's kind of, you know, last year where everything kind of just, I did like a deep dive. I was just like in, you know, of course, Scorpio energy is very intense and shadowy and dark. And I was very in that space, like really just sorting through myself and getting to the bottom of myself and being really grounded in it instead of running from myself, which is basically what I was doing before when I was like, oh yeah, positive vibes only, you know, good vibes only. Like I was literally
like,
running from
that's
myself.
not real life, because there's a lot of times where this shit is not positive, honey.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna just sit here and have a smile on my face when I'm literally pissed off or angry or whatever emotion I'm experiencing, you know? So I really had to sit down and have a meeting with myself. And I was like, you know, we were just there in our little hermit mode in the dark, no lights, just a little candle. We're like, all right, what's going on here? Like we need to talk through this because there's lots to unpack. So now, you know, moving forward, I have been learning, and I am learning, you know, how to integrate practices that allow me to sit with myself through those emotions and through, you know, that process and that unraveling and that, you know, rebirth process, because life isn't always sunshine and rainbows and flowers. And we know that because nature, like we're literally a reflection of nature. Like it rains, it pours, it's nighttime, stuff like grows, and there's
natural disasters that come and just fuck everything up.
Unexpected shit just happens, and you're like, okay, this is illuminating something within me that I need to look at. So yeah, it feels really good. I will say that. It, even in moments where I'm like, fuck, like this is a lot. I feel like crying isn't gonna get me through this. I need to do something else. Even in those moments, I feel like I feel so grateful to even be able to like, I don't know, just like learn and be in this part of my journey and be able to learn from that kind of like programming of how you're supposed to be and what spirituality is supposed to be and shit like that. Because I mean, if you think about it, like who are the people commercializing spirituality? White people. And it's like,
say white people.
Yes, our ancestors have been doing this shit for generations on generations, even before enslavement. And so it's like, what do I look like sitting here, you know, replicating this like white spirituality? Like it's so deeply personal and like ancestral to me that it's literally my second nature if I allow myself to sink into it. So I just feel so grateful. And I feel like, yeah, even in like moments where I'm experiencing like, I'm just shedding so much and experiencing this immense like grief and grieving former parts of myself and just being really in my body, I feel like it even expands my capacity for joy. Cause I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like when you sink so deep, you can soar so high. It's like you literally like, you can feel everything for better or worse.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a roller coaster, and I just feel so grateful.
That shedding parts of yourself it's so interesting, because I know that typically for me, I will I will mourn a shedding before it comes into like
Mm,
physical timeline of reality.
mhm,
I'll be in mourning and not really know why I'm like in the space that I'm at, or like understand the energy, and I'm getting better at like recognizing what it is when it comes, and I'm like, all right, well, something else is about to shed.
yeah.
But I will mourn, and then I will come into an experience in life where I'm really having to let go of some things, and specifically parts of myself that I have identified so strongly with my value or my worth that really don't have anything to do with it. Like,
Mm,
and so it'll feel so traumatic because I'll be like, well, like what do you mean? Like I'm not gonna have this or that because this is associated to like my identity. And
mm.
myself is like, no, it's not.
Yeah, like the fuck?
Like, okay, like I'm gonna show you
Right.
it's not. Like, because I'm about to
Yeah, and then
strip this
that's when it
shit.
gets a little,
Right.
yeah.
And things will strip off. And just like I think it's so interesting because I go like a lot of people who have known me to any capacity, probably in the last like I'll say 10 years, it's shorter than that, but anywhere in the span of like the last 10 years of my life to now, like most people will be like, you are a completely different person. And I'm like,
Mm,
yeah, it's been fucking difficult because it's been a lot of fucking shedding, like of some shit that I'm learning,
yeah.
like doesn't serve me, or beliefs that I have surrounding myself, or programming, or all of these things that I go like, and even that too, like I just remember just being like feeling very like almost really tough on myself because I would be like I would lose like my habits, like the discipline of my habits of like, wow, like for the last like 3 weeks, I haven't gotten up and meditated and written in my journal, and I haven't done this and I haven't done that. And like really beating myself up about it and being like, this is why you feel so terrible. And I'm like, and then I had to stop and go, you feel terrible because life is lifing.
Mm,
And you kind of just need to like take a break and go at your pace, and when it feels right to like get back to these things and it feels like you're capable of doing it, then start doing it again, because it is something that you enjoy. Like I really do enjoy journaling because it allows me to reflect and it allows me to get my ideas off and like all of those different things, and like it allows me to work through thoughts, it allows me to like just put out everything I'm feeling and then go back to it. And it's a really good way that I can go back through it and go like, well, that was your ego, that's not real, or like,
mm,
oh, that was that, or like, and it's like different things that I actually enjoy doing. But like you said, like I was so immersed in having to do all of the things that
mm,
I will like already feel bad and then make myself feel worse because I'm not doing all these things that are supposed to fix all the feeling of the bad. And it was
mm.
like, nah, it's just a time in your life where it's just you just gonna have to like sit in your feelings. And the
Yeah.
craziest thing is there is so much information in pain. Like there is
Yes.
a lot of information in
So many
there,
downloads.
oh my goodness, that we completely want to bypass because it doesn't feel good, or it's not a feeling that we,
Uncomfortable.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very uncomfortable feeling, or it's something that we, like you said, we've been told to like always be positive or always, and it's also like you don't want to give your energy to it, and I'm like, my energy already here, so
Like, I'm here. What's up?
like I don't, ain't no I'm not about to give nothing to it, like I'm already here. But I think pain has a whole lot of information when you're willing to get in it, and also like really like start to think about what are you hurting about,
Mm,
and what was like, and of the things you're hurting about, like how much of it is something that like it's kind of just a natural thing of life, right? Whether that's mourning or something of that nature, but how much of it is like something you've created in your head that isn't even really what it is, or how much of
mm,
it is um just like you beginning to learn something about yourself and now you know how to move differently. You know what I'm saying? Like to go like, oh, like I remember I just had a conversation with somebody the other day where I was like, I feel as though I've spent a lot of time like not speaking up about how I felt or how I
Mm,
feel. And I'm like, what pain has taught me is, hey, when you are experiencing something and you are not like expressing yourself, like stop repressing and just express yourself. Like
mm-hmm.
you don't have to do it this way. Like,
Yeah.
and it also showed me so much about myself and just this idea of like and I think that's just true of a lot of women in general, but like we take on so much, and I want to get to that later when we talk about balance, but we
Yeah,
take
we
on
got that.
so
We can keep
much,
that.
right? And we feel as though it's our job to hold everybody's hold the weight of everybody's shit all the time on top of our shit and like all the
Yeah.
different things. And I really had to say to myself in that moment, who asked you to do that? And I was
For
like,
real.
ah, damn. Like, didn't nobody ask me to do that? And it's like, okay, so how about you just stop? And I was like, okay.
Right.
And it was like, okay. So it's like, it's not your job to completely negate yourself or do all of these things to make sure everybody around you is good. And you're always worried about how their energy is and how they feel and all these different things. And you just sitting here heavy as fuck because you just randomly chose that shit, like because you thought it was the right thing to do. But my thing
Yeah.
is, like you're saying, kind of like to circle back, is if I didn't take the time to like sit in pain and sit in discomfort or have uncomfortable conversations and like sit in that a little bit and like feel uncomfortable and wiggly and like it was like, oh, I would have never gotten that. Like I would have continued
Mm,
on in life and I would have repeated that pattern until I learned to stop repeating that pattern.
yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, how about I stop doing this? Because it's something when yourself be like, who told you to do that?
Right. You gotta really sit down with yourself, like, hold on, like let's just talk through this for a minute. Cause who even where did you get this idea? Because we didn't say that.
Right? Like you just, why does this have to be true? And then I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess it doesn't. Oh, okay.
Right. And
That's
that's
what's up.
like such a powerful like thing to acknowledge and recognize, because you're able to shift your whole narrative of existing and how you like move through the world and free yourself up so much. Like you're like, I don't have to be heavy. I don't have to take out on everyone's problems. Like what? And I feel like that just made me think about like, what does it mean when you are like, you experience pain and you're like, I don't want to feel this. So you're like, you go do something, or you run from it, right? Like, how does that show up in our bodies? Because like you can run from it, but like it's not gonna run from you. Like it's gonna be there. It's gonna exist at the base of your spine, or it's gonna be like your back
Mm-hmm.
pain, or like your headaches, or your whatever, like emotional pain always manifests in our bodies.
Absolutely.
And it's like that pain is only going to accumulate. And I feel like, oh yeah, it's like what can we do to allow ourselves to acknowledge our pain and acknowledge that allow space for so much, allow ourselves to like learn from it, like you're saying, like there's so much opportunity in that space of like darkness and discomfort. And like if you think about like all the metaphors of like nature and the universe, like when it's nighttime, like that's when plants are able to grow, or like that's when the waves are at their peak. Like there's so
Mm-hmm.
much richness in that space despite the
Mm-hmm.
discomfort. And yeah, I feel like I've experienced that too. I've been in spaces where I'm like, okay, like that mourning and that pain of like parts of myself or parts that I've programmed myself to believe are like okay, or that help me navigate through the world to feel safe. And I've had to really like just get to the bottom of it. Like this isn't healing, and this isn't safe and this isn't protecting me from anything. Like
Mhm.
the only thing it's protecting me from is pain, this pain that I'm feeling. And this pain is never going to go away if I just keep sitting in this space of like wanting to be stagnant. And I feel like, you know, more to your point about like existing as women and specifically Black women, like taking on everyone's problems and almost like people pleasing as a means of like finding worth and value is kind of like how we've been socialized, that you have to be there for other people and that's the only way that you can be meaningful in a space.
Mhm.
And it's like, God, that's so much to carry. And I feel like I'm saying this from a space of still learning that and still learning
Mhm.
how to let go of that and how to integrate practices that where I don't belittle myself or don't make myself feel small to you know, when I'm in spaces, and like learning what it feels to be safe in who I am and not in, you know, being a basket for everyone's like traumas and emotions and all their shit. So that's real. So much power and pain
Ooh.
and grief.
And I know we talked about like wanting to have a conversation about balance, and what you said around like Black women. I've just been really giving that a lot of thought because um just this idea of like the balance of masculine and feminine energy. And
Mm.
to be very clear, for not you probably, but for people listening, like when I speak about like masculine and feminine energy, it has absolutely nothing to do with sex, sexual orientation, gender, none of that. I think everybody embodies a certain amount of masculine and feminine energy, and like masculine energy is associated with um like the logic and the pragmatic and the competitive and the driven and the this, and then like the feminine energy really exists in like creativity and nurturing and fluidity, and everyone has both. And I've been really thinking about this concept of like the earth being so off balance because we've had to exist, we not we've had to, but we have existed in so much masculine energy for so
Mm.
long, in centuries and centuries of patriarchy and centuries of capitalism. Like these are all very, very strong masculine energies, and everything needs balance. And so if we're super off balance in those energies, we have to kind of like find our way back to balancing that back out. And when I think about like women specifically, I go, women in, especially in this country, especially Black women in this country, it's like to have a voice or to be valued, you could only do so if you're going to subscribe to masculine energy. Like to be a
Mm.
woman and accomplish a bunch of things in this country, you have to like almost negate a lot of your feminine energy and like
Mm.
operate in a lot of masculine energy. And then men are already typically operating in this country specifically, are typically operating in a lot of masculine energy around like your emotions don't mean anything. It's all about what you can do, what you can accomplish, how much money you get, are you a millionaire by whatever, and like all of these things. And so it's like if our systems are very in masculine energy, if our men are very masculine energy and very out of tune with their own feminine energy, and women are having to adopt a lot of masculine energy just to freaking survive. And when I say Black
Mm.
women have it even worse, is because we're on the other end of like, and still existing in the killing of so many of our Black males, the incarceration of so many of our Black males. And so to literally just get shit done and like raise our families and do anything, we have to adopt a lot of this masculine energy, literally just to like push forward. And so, and for women, if sometimes it just feels like you can't fucking win because you are
Mm.
adopting this like more masculine energy just to like operate in this world of where that's dominant. And then also men will turn around and shit on you and be like, women aren't women anymore. Like, and it's like, what? Like, what the fuck? Like, where, like, in what space do you give me to exist in my femininity and still thrive. You know what I'm saying? And I love that women now are like are really beginning to like take that back in a lot of ways, that I see Black women, like, even though I totally agree with you, there's a lot of things spiritually that are like, y'all are just doing some shit. But seeing more Black women talk about self-care and talk about and like actively participate in that, and talk about community and talk about ecosystems and things of that nature, like, and have more spaces to play in their feminine energy a little bit more, it's really dope. But like, also what men have to realize is, if y'all don't play in your feminine energy more, how the fuck are we? Like, you are never going to create a safe space for us to be able to balance in whatever way. And I don't believe I don't think it's like everybody has the exact same amount. I think it's like, I think it's just your unique person has your unique combination of whatever those energies are. But I do think, like, if men are never going to take the time to operate in any of their feminine energy, it's going to be really difficult for us to, because we're going to have to, a lot of times we have to adopt what is predominant in order to actually be able to like vary in a three-dimensional space, get ahead, like, or to not even get ahead, just to survive. Like, a lot of times, like, it's literally just to freaking survive. And so this idea of like, there's just this huge imbalance of energies. And you also see how that negatively affects our earth, like overconsumption of resources, over competition, like how we treat people because of like this idea around like such heightened senses of capitalism around the world. Like, and I go like, we have to tilt the other way. And if we don't tilt the other way, we're just scorching earth until it can no longer be scorched. And there's just such an imbalance that I feel like I've been noticing or being more aware of. And even in myself, I go, in the last year or so, I've talked about this like on my social media and on my podcast, is like, I've been specifically doing things that help me feel more aligned with my feminine energy, because I feel like things are so out of balance that like I'm often trying to like play in that. But also it's my personality too. It's like, I have associated my value and my worth off of things that are very like, what did you accomplish? What goals did you set? Did you make those goals? Did you do this? Did you do that? Like all of these very like pragmatic things. And like, if someone asked me like where my spiritual journey started, it started with like me being like, I am really disintegrated from my emotions. Like, I have completely negated those things because I need to operate out here and I got to accomplish the shit. And I've also been in such a male dominated space, specifically with science, that like, fuck all that, I got to get the shit done, you know? And then having to finally go like, wow, I did all the shit and this shit still sucks. So what the fuck?
Yeah, because you're back in your body and you're like, wow, so I still have emotions, even if I thought I did it.
Like, y'all still here? I thought I told y'all to leave
Right.
10 years ago. What the fuck y'all still doing here? Have y'all eaten? No? So how are
like,
you
what
still
you want
alive?
from me?
Like, I've been starving you forever. So how are you still here? Like,
Man.
and then really having to like go into that. And then that played into like this idea of really beginning this journey of understanding like vulnerability. And then that turned into, I think the more I got in tune with my emotions, it took me back to really a very childlike version of me, because as a kid, my parents were always very like, yeah, you were like really sensitive. And they didn't have the language, and they still don't necessarily have the language to say what I know to now is like, I've always been a kid that can strongly sense like energies. And so when energies feel off, I'm always like, it affects me. And so I will be like, all right, like, let's make sure everybody's okay and everybody's happy because I can feel all this shit. And I remember my mom just being like, what? Like, yeah, you're pretty cold now, but like you used to be a really sensitive ass kid. And I'm like, yeah, now that I'm getting back into it a little bit more and delving back in more and more in there, I go like, oh, okay, like I remember what this felt like. I remember what it was like to have an intuition. I remember what it was like to have intuitive gifts that I didn't know how to name before. Like I I remember, and that's what I feel like so much of it is of like embodying and getting back in your body and getting your
Mm.
spirit aligned is literally just kind of like remembering what was going on when you got here. Like, and how much like they kind of sent you
Yeah.
off the beaten paths for a long time and now you gotta like come back to that shit.
Backtrack.
Right. And be like, oh wow, what a long time I've spent just to end back here. Like,
Yeah.
no, but it's a really interesting and a really dope experience. I think that I also was like looking for, and I've said this before too, it's just I needed everything, and also it's what you said, I needed everything to not be outside of myself. And I remembered getting to a point where I was like battling depression, and I remember being like, all right, based on my experience with religion, I'm here at this point where I really need something, and the only thing I have is this idea of like, well, just pray about it and it'll all get better. And I'm like, this has not been working because I'm praying and I don't feel like much is
Yeah.
happening, type of thing. And really what it was, because I like even now I pray all the time. Because to me, prayer is just talk to God and ancestors. Like, and what I wasn't realizing is I was praying and I was completely bypassing all of the things that, God was sending me as ways to actually start that path and start that journey, because I've associated those things with like, that's just that's some hippie shit. I don't know why that came across my page. Or like, oh, um that's that voodoo shit. Everything's from the devil if it
Yeah.
doesn't perfectly fit in this little box. And it
Yeah.
was like I'm just negating. And then at some point I finally was like, oh, wait, what about this? And it really took me down this path of like, it started with a podcast that I listened to, my favorite podcast I still listen to today, The Friend Zone. Um, and then that sent me to Miriam Hasnea and New Earth Mystery School. And that sent me to Shirley
Mm.
Johnson. And like all of these things kept like going in the right direction that I didn't know was the right direction, because it was initially because it was so like it was the whole like, this isn't what my religious upbringing is, and this isn't what that's supposed to
Mm.
be.
It didn't fit the box.
Yeah, it didn't fit the box. And what it was also doing, it was 100% being like, you're going to stop having to put all of your thoughts and hopes and expectations and all of these things outside of yourself. Like, it was going to require me to stop doing that. And it was going to require me to start really like not only sitting with myself and sitting in myself and embodying it, but also like understanding my own power and understanding um like honestly like God's connection through me and in me. And like the whole like, and it's so interesting to me because now there's so many things that biblically I go like, oh, that's what you meant. You know,
Mm.
like,
Connecting the dots. Yeah.
right, where I go like, oh, like, all right, well, that makes sense now. Like, even when people talk about all the like, because everybody's manifesting nowadays, right? So even when everybody's talking about them, like, the power of life and death is within your tongue. Like, that's a thing from the Bible. And to
Mm.
me, I just thought that meant like, beware. I'm always scared about what I do or don't say because I might like, send myself to hell, and it's like, no, it's just your reality is created by that which you speak. Like,
Yeah.
and And I was like, and so it's like kind of gotten me to a space now where I can go like, oh, I can actually understand and then have the ability to begin to embody a lot of the things that I have learned and also let some things go that I just don't really rock with, right? But like other things that I do still resonate with, I'm like, I can embody this because before it was like this was all knowledge. And when it came time to put knowledge into practice, I didn't know what to do because I had no connection with that. And then that became wisdom because knowledge began to mix in with experience and I was able to put things into practice. And from there I got to embodiment where it's like, oh, okay, like now I can integrate this into myself and into my life because I get it now and I can practice it and I can do it and it becomes almost like a second nature. And I always say this too, like when it came to teaching, it's like I can spend as many years as I want to learning about chemistry and I can tell you for damn sure I didn't know a damn thing about chemistry so I teach that shit. Like I was like, whoa.
Yeah, when you actually like practice it, it makes sense.
And then I'm like, okay, well shit. Why we wouldn't do this from jump? Why I go to school all this long time on this fucking knowledge for no reason? Y'all should have just let me figure this shit out like this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But, when you think about like balance and really anything like that you want to bring up, like when you think about balance, like what comes to mind?
I think about kind of what we talked about before about balancing between this space of, sitting with my emotions and being so like deeply in them and not being able, like being so compounded by like just the ashes of rebirth that I can't make my way out of that hole. And then on the other hand, like being just completely avoidant, like emotions too. So I feel like balancing those energies has definitely been a process. And I feel like just my journey in general has been very like all over the place. It's never been linear. And I know that's a very cliche thing to say, that like your process isn't linear. But it really isn't. I've really had to come back to myself and come back to lessons that I thought I learned. And I had to really humble myself and be like, you are really disillusioning yourself. Like you need to, you can't skip any steps. You can't just be like, all right, I meditated, let's go. I feel like, yeah, just finding the courage to inhabit that space where I'm able to integrate and deeply, learn from these things and emerge from that space instead of sitting in it and like really, when it becomes too much, when you're either really deep in the ground that you can't dig yourself out, into when you're so far in the sky that you literally can't find yourself. So trying to really embody that space of fluidity in my body and not and trying to like find balance between those two, like allowing myself to come up for air and to breathe and nourish myself, and also to be really deeply seated in those emotions, because there's just so much, like we said, there's so much in that space. And I feel like I struggle with the extremes in this instance, but like in many things in life, I struggle with like all or nothing energy. Like I'm all in this or I'm done, So that's one example. I feel like also in the context of like masculine and feminine energies, I feel like I do go through spaces and times in my life where I'm like heavily in masculine energy. And I feel like you're saying, in this space of so much because masculine energy, I think about like in tarot, which the card, the devil, represents Capricorn, and taking it out of context of like hell and the devil, like the devil represents like society and structures and materialism and externalizing yourself for material purposes, right? And so I feel like being so heavily in masculine energy has I don't know, I feel like it does a lot of damage like on my, you know, my emotional body and like who I truly am, like on the inside, like really soft and mushy and just like very emotional. Because I feel like it forces me into a space of so much like rigidness that I almost feel like my heart is like closed, and I operate from a very egoistic space. And I feel like I was in that space a lot, like in school and when I was in work as well, and just being very rigid and embodying the more unevolved masculine energies, I should say. I don't know if that is possible to be unevolved masculine energy, but embodying that energy that isn't necessarily healthy. Because I know that there's a lot of people say like, oh, masculine energy is like, oh, it's disgusting, you know, we hate that. But I feel like in a healthy sense, masculine energy is very grounding.
It helps you get shit done.
Yeah, it's literally like
100%.
I like to use the metaphor of like, if I feel like we were talking about this too previously, but I feel like feminine energy is the ocean and masculine energy is like the boat. Like there would be no boat if there was no ocean. Like you can't have masculine energy without feminine energy. And I feel like in a healthy sense, when it's really grounded and not infused with ego and external things, I feel like masculine energy is very grounding and very I don't know, like supportive, and helps usher things in from the feminine, which is very watery and abstract, and the creator and the dreamer and things like that. And so I feel like
it's the like it's the literally what you said. Like I feel like the feminine energy and like again, like I said, everybody has both, so it's not about being male or female. It's like, but it is this like creative, almost etherical space, and how we can then bring that like into like physical being and tangible being relies a lot on our masculine energy, literally, to get the shit done. And they are both super useful, and it's like trying to make sure that we aren't negating one or the other. And like I think having a better understanding of like how they play together and how they can best be utilized together. And I totally agree, because I mean, like, you know, creation for show is a feminine ass energy. But like it's the ushering in, you know. For sure.
And I feel like go ahead.
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I feel like it's also like on the other end of being very like feminine, it's like being very like dreamy and ethereal, that you're so tapped out of the real world. It's like, what I mean, you know, I mean, it's nice to be in the dream world for a minute, but it's like, what are you doing with your gifts that allows you, you know, that these energies can really help you bring into this world? And so that's what I feel like I've been thinking a lot about when it comes to balancing masculine and feminine energies, is like, how do I, like you said, let these energies like dance within me and like have fun and really work together to create space for my gifts to be in this world, you know, and to really be here, you know, in the physical plane. Because I feel like, I mean, we all are sent here. I mean, in my opinion, we all are sent here with gifts that manifest in our passions or things that we get excited about, or like stuff that we like to do when we're kids, that are really like powerful tools for us to usher in, you know, bring that energy into this plane to help other people to whatever means. And I feel like that's what I'm moving through now, is like finding that balance, because I feel like right now I'm in a very dreamy space and like just thinking about like so many ideas and so much that I want to like bring into this world. And also like just feeling really like on another note, feeling really like feminine and like sensual in my body, and allowing myself to feel really like safe and nurtured and nourished as I'm like dreaming these things up. So just trying to meet my masculine energy in the middle and be like, all right, what's next? Because I got the ideas, like, let me know what to do with this. Cause yeah, I get really immersed in that like watery energy, and I'm just like, oh, geez. And then the masculine, like I just really go in extremes. Like I'm either very dreamy, or I'm very like, this is what needs to get done. This is what we need to do. Da 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 da. So I feel like just seeing that, like really working in tune, that's not the word I want to use, working in harmony is so powerful for like manifesting and like bringing things into this world that you want to see into fruition. So
heck yes, I agree. I'm kind of the opposite of like, I'm so used to being in a little bit more of like my masculine energy that I get uncomfortable when I'm in that like feminine energy a little bit more, when I'm in that like kind of like airy creative space, like I'm trying to get way better and more comfortable with it, and understand that it's like there's times for both. Like there's 100% seasons for each one of these things to exist. And so I'll be like, it'll be moments where I've been like, oh my God, it's been like 3 weeks and like I haven't like worked on the pod, or I haven't worked on this other idea I have, and I haven't like physically done something. And I'll also sit back and laugh at myself a little bit, because as much as I like get on myself about not being pragmatic, I'll be like, how many times in this 3 or 4 week span have you had new ideas and new downloads that are still being birthed to create this like full picture of the idea? Like, and not that like everything always lays itself out perfectly and then I can go do. A lot of it is like you get enough to then start, and then you learn as you go type of thing. But I noticed that it's the getting enough to start that I go like, as long as I get something, I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to start. And then Spirit's like, chill.
Yeah.
Like, let it all come in. And when it's time to start, I'll be very clear about it. And then go start, you know? And like, even with this podcast, it was like all of these ideas. And every single day I was like, well, I need to make sure every single day I'm looking up like something about sound editing or something about this or something about that. And And it was like, I felt like I was stressing myself out, but then also feeling so uncomfortable with the patience of allowing it to kind of like flow in and relax into it. And like, that's something I really, really am trying to like work on and be better at, is like this idea of relaxing and receiving. And for me, I receive things when I'm specifically in a more like feminine energy, a more fluid, a very relaxed, like calm and like, you know, like playful and like I'll be doing things that have absolutely nothing to do with whatever the project is, but I'll be like painting and I'm just kind of just like, yeah, and kind of just being on my like, you know, like, oh, like, you know, everything's like, you know, life and, and you know, the things. And then I'll like get all of the ideas, and then I'll be like, oh, okay. And then I'd be like, okay, I should have calmed down, because how many times now have we done this cycle? You just needed to calm down until you got the amount of the picture that she needed to get and got the go ahead to go ahead,
Yeah.
and it's like, and the patience too is something that I have a really difficult time with. And I was actually going to ask that, like, has working in nature helped you with like patience?
Hmm. I will say that it has taught me patience,
Okay.
which I guess is yes. I feel like, yeah, because I mean, my experience in working in the garden that I'm in has been, when I was in high school, I was in like this program where like we would do like planting native plants and stuff, but it was very much like dig this hole, put this plant in, water it. Very like masculine, like very like, I don't know what the word for it is, but like the spirit wasn't there. It was just like, we're planting this because this needs to be here. And I was like, okay. So I didn't have a lot of experience with growing seeds or planting things and when to plant them and things like that. Nature has its own cycle. And so I ended up planting some things pretty late, and I was just so nervous. I was like, just with anything, when you're starting something new, or when you're I feel like it was more heightened because it was like a living thing, like plants. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna plant these. And I planted them late and I was really nervous. But I feel like it definitely has taught me so much, not only about patience, but about cycles and processes, and the inevitable way that, like, we have times where we bloom and we have times where in the winter. So when I started working there, like the garden, it's a space centered for Black people essentially, and lifting up like land sovereignty and things like that. So I feel like when I first went into the space, there wasn't someone there last year, so there was a lot of like winter overgrowth and lots of leaves, and just it was very I don't know how to explain it. There was just lots. It wasn't clean, I guess. I don't. How can Earth be clean? So just that experience of like cleaning everything and like seeing all of the growth underneath the layers of like overcrop, cover crops, and weeds, and just all this different stuff. I was just like, I was so in my emotions. I was like, oh my goodness, like life. Because it's such a metaphor. It literally is like
literally life.
Because it felt so much of like the process that I was in at the time that I started, which was like, this pandemic was still there. It's the beginning of 2020, like right before spring. It was winter. Santa Cruz in the winter is like so rainy and dreary, and you barely see the sun. So I was definitely in a space of feeling really, there was a lot of like overgrowth that was needing to be cleaned and shed and everything. So in the process of like cleaning the land and pulling up the weeds and getting the soil ready for like planting things in spring, it just felt so like it just reminded me of the process of life, and how much I personally get so caught up in wanting results, because we're in a society where it's like you do something and you immediately want to see something of it. And so just having to be really patient and with myself in that process, and being like holding space for new growth and cleaning away what no longer serves me. And also at the same time, like while we were cleaning, like of course the weeds would go, well, sorry, I keep assuming the weeds would have to go into a green waste bin away from the land, because it would like create more weeds if you just give it back to the land. But some of the things like the cover cropping, which is used to protect the soil in the winter so we can grow things in the spring, can be basically like given back to the land. And so just thinking about how like how these things that are kind of like we feel like we've outgrown, or we feel like we're ready to shed, it's like you don't instantly you don't have to, those things don't have to be like thrown away or forgotten or whatever. It's kind of like those things can be reintegrated and be fertilizer for your upcoming experiences and for new seeds that you're going to be planting. And I just
Come
felt like
on.
I was just like, I was
Oh,
so
word,
emotional.
honey.
I
Oh,
was so
word.
emotional. Literally me pulling up the weeds like, look at God. Like, what he doing? Like, I was literally so emotional because I was like, I was also, like I said, in a really hermit mode, and very like just shedding and releasing so much. So like just the act and like having these downloads of like all the metaphors of it all just showed me so much about like what I just said, and process, and allowing, you know, that rebirth in former parts of ourselves to be fertilizer for, you know, the spring, and when we plant new things and when we allow those to grow. So I've just learned so much.
You
The
so
earth is
dope.
like
You so dope. And like the interconnectedness of it all is like, it's so I've been reading a book called The Geography of Thought. And I don't believe that anything is a coincidence anymore, but every year that there is I forgot what it's called. It's White Elephant Sale. So it's like this huge like thrift thing that's put on by like, I think the Oakland Museum, the people who run the Oakland Museum. I don't know. Big ass thrift thing. That's where I go buy a large portion of my books if it's not a specific book that I'm aiming at. But I just kind of go there and get lost in the book section and find something that I find interesting and whatever it calls to me, and I just get it. And I love to do it there because they're like, it's a thrift place, so the books are like $2. So I'm like, sweet. And I randomly picked up this book called The Geography of Thought, and I just started reading it. Well, I'm like a little halfway through now, but it's like a cultural psychology book about this comparative analysis between how Westerners think and how Easterners think, and how our thought processes and how we see the world and how we navigate the world and how our brain connects things is completely different. And it was also like exciting to read that, because that's one of the biggest things I miss about traveling was like, I don't travel often very glamorously. Like it's usually a backpack and staying in a hostel, because I'm like, I kind of just want to know.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm like, what's everybody else over here doing and thinking about? Like, what's going on with y'all? Like, but it's so interesting to understand, or to start to see these different ways in which they're talking about basically how one of the basis of why we think about the world so differently is that Western culture but like a lot of it came from the Greeks. And so it was a huge emphasis on debate. And so this individualization of self and this individualization of thought, and to be able to debate, I have to distinguish my ideas from your ideas, and then I have to win this debate. And it was this a lot of things we associate with a lot of patriarchy and capitalism and things of that nature. It's like, it was this we're so about the individual. And it was so interesting because they also talked about how like, as Westerners, we're so particular about labeling every individual thing, and we focus on individualized objects as opposed to the context. But it was that Easterners think completely differently and literally have different language. Like there's certain languages there's certain parts of language that they literally don't have, because it won't like this understanding of such an individualized self doesn't even exist in their thought process. And it was because in the same time that the Greeks were doing their thing, the Eastern cultures were completely agricultural. And so they were on land, working the land. And so much of that meant they had to understand that everything is within context and everything is interconnected. And so their view is always this bigger span versus the individual thing. And how our societies have then began to branch and come. And they always talk about like the farther west you move, the more individualized and everything we all want to be and get. And how like in a lot of Eastern cultures, it was so much more based on harmony and the need and the understanding of interconnectedness, but it was agricultural. So you needed each other as on top of that to make something work. And so how our thought and how we see the world is so starkly different, and kind of going on the trip of like why, and then also throwing in a bunch of like tests that they've done, because it's also a psychology book. So they're all these tests that they've run on people, and that sounds bad, but they didn't do any of the bad testing on people. It was more so like, if you look at an image, like if I test Americans versus, you know, Koreans, and you're looking at an image, you'll notice that Americans are fixated on this centralized point and can only tell you about differences in the one object, whether like, as opposed to this group of people will tell you about like, there were all these changes to like the outer portion and the context of it, and like, and also this idea of like, when they understand human behavior and how people act and all those different things, these Eastern cultures look at the context of it significantly more than we do, which I also thought was so interesting to recognize that, like, because I think one of the biggest things that Americans lack, especially when I think about a bug, I think about I don't kill him.
Look at nature.
I know, just doing its thing. Ugh, I didn't even kill that spider.
It's you was talking about me,
right? Like, and it's our way and our lack of like thinking within context. And so I even think about like our American legal system, right? It's like we take so much out of context, and especially when you think about specifically like Black people, it's like, we'll talk about all these supposed negative things and horrible things that we do, lacking complete context of anything around it. And it was so interesting to me to go like, oh, well, like this has been passed down for centuries and centuries and centuries, this idea of removing context and focusing in on an individualized thing. And it was crazy. I thought about that because it all points back to physically what people were doing in those different parts of the world. And because people over here were significantly more connected to actually cultivating land, their view of life is
drastically
starkly different. And I'm getting away from always calling things like good and bad, right? Like I don't always want to call everything like that's the right way, or that's the wrong way, or that's the good, or that's the bad way. I think a lot of things in life are, and they produce different effects and consequences and things of that nature. Because I will also say with that, they also talk about how like there is such a lack of individualism and uniqueness, and there's a lot of pressure put on, in Eastern cultures, there's a lot of pressure of making sure that you don't disturb somebody else, or you don't, making sure your contribution to the whole has to be significant, and like a lot of stress and pressure around that. So it's like, it's not to say like they had it absolutely right and we had absolutely wrong. I think again, balance, right? But it was just really, really interesting to just look at how like, how disconnected as a Westerner I felt personally reading the book, of like, oh shoot, like sometimes I don't always think about the interconnectedness of everything. And also like, I've gotten significantly better at this over time, but I also know we're as Americans typically are not the best at realizing that they're not the center of the universe. Like we have a way of really believing that we are the center of the freaking universe, and it all is moving and revolving around this one individual, and we miss a lot of things going on that are still also happening in the picture, which is a whole other conversation about like taking things personal and like not knowing how to listen and all this other good stuff. But I was just like, that's why I was interested to be like, hey, did it teach you patience, but did it also like help you start to see like kind of like more contextually, see the world more contextually, and also see like the interconnectedness of all things that are like coming into play at times, as opposed to like flower. How do I get flower to come up, look pretty, cut to put on my table, flower. And it's like, nah, you gotta.
Yeah, there's so much. Yeah, nature is just full of lessons and metaphors and so much like, and I'm still learning. I feel like the sage that we're growing in the garden is like flowering, which means that it's gonna like start producing seeds. And I was asking like my mentor slash advisor who like supports me, I was like, oh, like when when are the seeds like gonna be ready? And she was like, yeah, they're not gonna be ready yet. Like the bees need to like do their job. They need to like, I don't even know. I'm not gonna say like I know what they're doing, but like they're doing something to make the seeds ready. But yeah, it's just so interesting. Like it's been a very humbling experience to like learn from nature, and I feel like yeah, it's been humbling. And it feels cool. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but like it feels cool to like learn about like just like land sovereignty and learn about how we can be how Black people specifically can be self-sustaining, especially considering our historical like connotation of being, you know, exploited for our gifts of tending to land and returning to land in a way that's rejuvenative and like connecting to our ancestors instead of being so centered in a colonizing way where it's like extract and that's it. Like you're just growing the plants to extract them, not growing certain plants in certain areas to fertilize the soil, or growing plants to feed people, or growing plants for the birds, the hummingbirds and the bees and stuff. So yeah, so many lessons when you really like tune in. And I feel like you were saying, just those contrasts of being in a very like intellectual space and philosophical, like these are my ideas and these are why they're right and let's fight, versus like being with the land and like, oh, the interconnectedness, the cycles and all of that. I feel like finding, you know, a medium. And I feel like, I don't know, I read Octavia Butler. I've been reading Lilith's Brood. So good. Just learning about like reading about how humans are, her concept is that humans have this contradiction to where they're like intelligent, but they crave a hierarchy. And it's interesting to think about how that plays out, and like, is that specifically human, or is that how we understand life in a colonized space? But yeah, so many lessons.
Yo, this has been amazing. Always better than I initially. Actually, I don't want to say that because I literally went into it being like, it's gonna be great. I don't know what it's gonna be, but it's gonna be great. And I was like, yee. So I want to say thank you. Oh, also, okay. So I want to say I know Naliyah because she was one of the students at my high school. Yeah, so like I said, when I thought about like who to speak to this season for spirituality, you were who came to mind. And I know this gets said very flippantly nowadays because it's like the cool thing to do, but I genuinely met you, and I remember talking to Miss Kathy and been like, she's been here before. And I was like, and you're the only person up until that point in my life that I had ever met that I met and was very sure about that I was like, this being has been here. And that also to me was really trippy because that was never something I actually believed. Like I had heard it before and was like, all right, whatever. And then I met you and was like, oh, like, oh snap. And I remember talking to you about that one day. You're like, yeah, I have, and it's the ghetto. Fuck, I reincarnate here right now.
Man.
But you just have this like, I don't know, to me, I don't have an age distinction between us. Like, I don't have like oh, that's one of the kids I used to, whatever. Like, I was never your direct teacher, but like, that's just one of the kids. I was like,
But
no,
you did
like,
teach me.
oh, well, thank you. But I just have always been like, she got it. She got it, and it's always, to me, it's so much of like the people I get to interview for my podcast and stuff. Like, people always just go like, you have really dope, like amazing people around you, and I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't really want to take too much credit for this, other than I'm able to like have the conversation and listen. But these people are pretty freaking amazing. So, and I told you before, and I'll just say it while we're still recording, is like, I purposely was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to introduce like who you are and how I know you in the beginning, because I need people to like see you, and I need people to hear you, and not discredit the like, oh, what? She's only, how old are you now? 20?
21.
21? Did you just turn 21?
I turned 22 in November.
Okay. To be like, oh my God, like what? Like, you know, because I think so much of like, when we hear age, we go like, oh, they not gonna have no, you know, they don't know
nothing.
They fresh off, you know, off the titty, you know. And I was like, no, I need people to like hear you for you, and then I could be like, by the way, this was a kid when I met her, and you have evolved, but like this core of who you are has always been there. And so, like, to people listening, you have to understand how fucking blown away I was by meeting what like 17-year-old you and being like, what the fuck? Like, oh my gosh. Like, oh shit. Okay. Like, well, you've been here. So we'll just interact, and hopefully we both learn from each other, because I don't know that I got too much to teach you. So yeah, I really, and also I'm really grateful and appreciate that you were willing to be on the pod. You're willing to have the conversation, and that you were like, you so dope, because all the times we've like kind of been like, it doesn't feel right yet, but like maybe
divine
like,
timing.
I'm not. Yes, and that's something that for me, it's hard to sometimes explain to people, where I go like, it's not time, and they're like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't. I ain't got it yet. And then I finally felt like, probably about 3 weeks ago, I was like, okay. Because I finally like felt like I got like what it is y'all need to really converse about. And then I was like, all right, well, now let's figure out from here. And like, now I'm like, okay, well, we can just make a time whenever we have time. But before, I just felt like I haven't clicked yet. And you were the same way. You're like, no, it's not there yet. It's not there yet. And I'm like, I know. And I'm like, and I can't put my finger on why, but it's just not. And you understood it and you got it. So I was like, that's what's up. So thank you so much for being here. I don't know, like, do you want to like shout out anything / give like your handle or anything? Like, you don't have to.
I can share.
I just was like, if you want to, do your thing. If you don't want to, be like, mind your business.
No, I can share my personal Instagram, and people can watch out for some magic dropping soon.
Come on now.
Let me see what it is, because I don't even remember. My Instagram is BLU.moon, MOON, alchemy, ALCHEMI.
I'll also drop it in the description. Two things. I'll put it in the description for YouTube, and then also I'll tag her when I post on my Instagram, so y'all can go follow this magical goddess over here, and whatever magic you got coming, you know I'm just for it. Even if I'm not there to support, I'm gonna find a way to send something or get something. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. I appreciate the support, and I also wanted to say thank you so much for having me. This is my first time being on a podcast. So of course, I was very nervous, and I feel grateful to you for also, like you said, like acknowledging that everything has a time, and a time when it's right for us to converse and share messages. And of course, like my highest intention is for this to reach everyone in a way that like reach everyone from the heart, because it's coming from the heart, I feel, for me and for you, obviously. So thank you so much. And like you said that you didn't have anything to teach me, but definitely like when I met you, I was just so like inspired by your presence and the way that you took up space and were so like your throat chakra was open. In my like from my point of view, I was like, okay, I'm inspired by this, because like of course in high school I was just very like in my head and just, you know, thinking about things and not really vocalizing a lot. But definitely witnessing you like being fully like taking up space and being very like direct in a loving way was so inspiring. And I just remember like we were on some committee together, and it was like, you probably don't remember, but everyone was like, oh yeah, Naliyah's gonna be this and she's gonna do that, and like just projecting like what they wanted to me to be. And you were like, she's gonna be what she want to be. And I was like, okay, period. Let them know. Let them know, because yeah.
I'm like, I'm pretty sure she's more sure about herself than y'all are sure about yourselves at this table at 50, 60, 40 years old. Because I'm not worried about her. Like,
I didn't say
it. If we gonna be real honest about what's going on, I think she got y'all beat. So
anyway, that's the case. But yeah, thank you so much for existing, for creating this space, and just being, you know, exploring life in true life past 7, you know, fashion. Right. Yeah, so authentic, so full of heart and soul and fire. And like I feel like you, from witnessing the space that you created, are really harmonizing like both energies, like we talked about, like really beautifully. So I'm inspired on multiple levels. So thank you.
I'm not the best at taking compliments, but I will receive them, because I said receiving and relaxation. So thank you. I really, really appreciate and love that, and love you. And I thank you. So this has been another episode of Conversations with Nation. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. We are actually getting really close to the end of the season. And then I go back into like hibernation for a little bit and figure out what's popping out next season. I've already got some ideas, but and then make sure you follow at conversations_with_nation. Yeah. And so thank y'all for joining us. And I haven't done this one in a while, but like always be in your power. I haven't dropped that in a minute. So yeah.
Great way to end it.
Right?